Welcome back. Now, it's a kind of a slow news day today in the NHL, which is okay because there's games tonight, and then there's the power rankings I'm doing, and then tomorrow's preview and all that. I thought, all right, so why not do a list video? So I did a list of 32 players from 31 teams that I felt were feel good stories. Now, I want to get into a list of a different idea here that I've had in my brain for like the last couple of weeks. 31 players on 31 teams who have impressed me so far this year in that I either they've achieved more than I thought they would, they've played better than I thought they might. So this again is another one where in the comment section below you guys can debate who you think should be on the list, and there are no wrong answers. There aren't wrong answers. There aren't wrong. Okay, so people in the comment section are going to put up answers that would be wrong. Fine. So again, I've rearranged everything. The alphabet is not a thing on these videos now, because whatever. And so we're going to start with Vancouver. We're going to end with Washington. And in between, we got teams all just randomly assorted because I just randomized them again. We're starting off with Vancouver. And this is giving credit where credit is due for this year. Tyler Myers. I'm not going to pretend that the Tyler Myers contract is not still likely to age poorly. And last year, especially in the return to play, there were a couple of games he had there that were an issue. However, he has played really, really well this year, and he's really justified that contract this season. And again, for this season, we can all have that debate some other season, but for this year, Tyler Myers has been very good for Vancouver and impressive. Pittsburgh, I'm going with a signing that has worked out really well. And watching that Pittsburgh game today and looking at Cody Ceci and looking at his game and where it was through everywhere else he played before he ends up in Pittsburgh, and he may want to stay in Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh may want to keep him around. It's worked out pretty well so far. And Ceci, I think, has achieved a lot more than what was expected of him coming into this season. So that's kind of what this list is to be about, is the guys who we may have been skeptical. I may have been skeptical of personally. It's actually proven that, they're pretty good. Tampa. This is a player who's had up and down years. This year he's been fantastic. And in recent games, Yanni Gourde at times has been the most dangerous forward on the ice for Tampa. He's been really quite good. So, going with Yanni Gourde, I think he's been, really good for them. And it'll be interesting to see what they do in expansion. So, again, I went through and did an expansion draft that I didn't do a video for or anything the other day. And, when you get to the forward group, it's interesting to look at who may or may not get protected. New York Islanders, which would be on the previous page. So, this is a player who went to the Islanders, signs a big contract. But this year, what's been impressive with J.G. Pageau is how well he's fit in offensively. He has fit in so well for the New York Islanders. And he's been able to play various roles. And honestly, his scoring, I had expected it to probably drop a bit more than it has. So for the Islanders, Pageau looks like a brilliant move for Lou Lamoriello right now. And he's been pretty darned impressive. So kudos to him. Colorado. I went with a player that everybody knows is one of my favorites, but I'm not going to pretend that I knew what he was going to do this year. I'm not going to pretend that I knew what Jonas Donskoi was going to do. He's got 15 goals right now. Like, over a full season, he could have been close to 30 goals this year. I'm not going to pretend that I knew that. I've always liked his hard work. I've always liked his ability to get into the dirty areas and fight for the puck. The goal scoring this year, I didn't expect that. And so, to me, Jonas Donskoi this year has been just very good. Big surprise this year. Montreal. So, when I did the list of feel-good stories, I went with Tyler Toffoli. On some level, Toffoli's also been kind of the surprise. Now, none of the players you see on this board are going to match ones that were on the previous list. I've still got that in this book. And I've made sure I didn't use the same players twice. Josh Anderson, that pickup from Columbus, looks brilliant for Mark Bergevin. And the thing is, Josh Anderson, as much as we can look at that now and go, well, that was a slam dunk. At the time, there was certainly a lot of reason to be concerned due to the fact Josh Anderson was coming off of a season where he had one goal. He was hurt, but he'd been injured so much the previous season. There's no guarantee he'd bounce back. So while he's had some hot and cold streaks, he's been good enough for Montreal, and he's provided them a little bit of everything. It's looked like a brilliant signing. And not only that, but the previous season in Columbus, he had 26 goals. In Montreal, he's on pace for more than that if we'd played an 82-game schedule. So not only did he get his scoring back, but he's on a pace where he probably would have set a career high in goals if we had a full 82-game schedule. So that's just been brilliant. Ottawa. Ottawa, I'm going with somebody that I have talked about in videos, and that's Nick Paul. Nick Paul has been fantastic for Ottawa in almost every game they've played this year. The work ethic, just he's been such a smart player. And to me, he's a guy that if Seattle's not scouting him, I'd be very surprised. With Ottawa and with who they have to protect and who they don't, they'll be fun to watch too, because they're not going to lose anybody key. Most of their key players are exempt in the expansion draft. But they could lose a forward of the likes. It's possible Paul's the guy that goes. It's possible he gets protected. Again, once that list comes out, we'll have all kinds of discussions about who didn't get protected and why wasn't this guy protected. But yeah, Nick Paul, interesting name, and he's had a very good year for them. Rangers, I went with a rookie, and I'll write him up here and I'll explain why. When Keandre Miller comes into play for the Rangers this year as a rookie, I think that how well he's played out of the gate, the fact that he's playing like a veteran, is noteworthy. The offense will come later, but right now the defense is there, and he's been quite good. He has been very, very good, and if you're watching a game, you'd have no idea. If somebody didn't tell you, hey, that kid's a rookie, you'd have no idea. You'd be like, Miller, who's that Miller guy? He's a veteran. Well, it shows in his play. He plays like a veteran. Toronto. So Toronto, everybody always talks about their defense and how their defense isn't any good. That's one of the first things you'll hear, is that, well, their defense isn't any good. Well, no goaltender's going to be good behind that defense. Picking up TJ Brody was a very smart move by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, Tyson Berry's gone on to be very good with Edmonton. I think we kind of saw that coming, though, because, he's playing on a team that's got a really good power play, usually anyways, and you're playing with McDavid and Draisaitl. So you're going to get points as a defenseman, right? TJ Brody in Toronto has put up some very good defensive numbers. He's been really, really good for them. And while Calgary, I've got a defenseman as the guy for them that I've gained a lot of respect for this year too. Brody's been very, very good in Toronto. And it's interesting how we've seen defensemen switch places in Canada among the Canadian teams. It's worked out pretty well for the teams that picked him up. And then the guys who've replaced him have done pretty well. Calgary. And the thing with Calgary is I really kind of wanted to put Lindholm here, but I used Lindholm in the last video. So I'm going to go with Chris Tanev. If anybody's wondering if there's a sound in the background, you're like, what is that noise? We have a 3D printer upstairs. The boys got it like 2.5 weeks ago. It's on all 24/7. That 3D printer's going. So, apologize. It's kind of at the other end of the house, but kind of not at the same time. So, if there's something you're like, I'm trying to isolate that noise, it's 3D printer. So yeah, Chris Tanev is the one I'm using for Calgary. When he left Vancouver, I wasn't all that happy that Vancouver lost him. During the playoffs last year, I talked a lot about how I really thought the Canucks needed to keep Tanev, that he was the guy keeping that blue line together. And I think on some level that's been proven correct this year with Vancouver and what they've gone through. Calgary has been a disappointment. I don't think Tanev's been part of that disappointment. And the duo of Tanev and Hanifin, at least for the first while during the season, they didn't allow a 5-on-5 goal. Pretty darn sure that changed over the last month or so, but Tanev's been very good. And what's impressed me with Tanev is he's fit in with Calgary right out of the gate, and to this point, he still hasn't missed any time with injury. And yet he's still playing Tanev's game. He's still shot blocking. He's still playing that defensive game. It's not like he's stopped playing hard or anything. He's just been fortunate he hasn't missed any games this year. So I'm impressed. Arizona. For Arizona, I went with... Yeah. So this is a player who I feel like has really taken a step this year. And just the goal scoring. like, the work ethic for Jacob Chychrun has always been fantastic, and there's nothing to take away from that. But the goal scoring this year has just been insane. He's scoring goals at will, and it's been great to watch him develop and blossom and become one of the better defensemen in the league. And as I say, when I talk about teams from some of these Sunbelt cities, if he was playing in an original six environment, he would likely be getting a lot of buzz for the Norris Trophy right now. Chychrun's been fantastic. Carolina. If you want to look at a bounce-back season and a player that offensively has performed better than I thought he would, it's Jordan Stahl. On a Carolina team that has plenty of depth and lots of speed, and they're a pretty good team, Jordan Stahl has had a great year. And he's reached the 1,000-game mark, so it's not like he's really young, and it's been a really, really impressive year for Stahl, and that's why I wanted to do a list and have all these players on them, because in some cases they might be players that we already talk about, and in some cases they might not. In Stahl's case, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Winnipeg. So Winnipeg at the start of the year, there was a lot of talk about their defense, right? A lot like Toronto. Derek Forbort was not seen as a defenseman that was going to make a really big difference for Winnipeg. It was kind of and Forbort's gone to Winnipeg. In other news, and yet he's been really good for them. The offense isn't what you may need on that blue line. I do think they need one more offensively minded defenseman back there. But Forbort's been pretty solid. The first pass, the good defensive play, he's been pretty good for them. So Forbort, who was, again, probably an afterthought during the offseason, he's been pretty good. And I think he's earned a role with this team going forward. So, yeah, Derek Forbort. Edmonton. Now, I've been a big fan of Darnell Nurse for a long time. I thought that he was getting overplayed early in the season. But he's produced, he's played well, and I think he's really grown into the role of being one of the go-to guys on that blue line, to the point where when Klefbom's healthy, I think the Oilers have some questions to answer. And again, I know Klefbom is not healthy this year, and I know they're just trying to get him back. But if Klefbom's good to go next year, and that's the hope, right? Does Edmonton make other moves on that blue line? Now, Larson's coming up. He's UFA this year. So there's room there. There's cap room there, too, for them to make some changes. But Nurse, I think, has been really, really good all around. And I think his game's getting better as the season goes along. Detroit. I really wanted to have Adam Ernie here, but Adam Ernie was already in the last video I did on this. So I'm going to go with a player that early in the season, Luke Glendenning, you could just know him for being good at faceoffs. He's one of the best faceoff men in the league. But as the season's gone along, he's started playing really well. So it's not just take the face off and get off the ice so somebody else can get out here. He's starting to play a lot better now. He seems to play really well against Dallas. Got a game against Dallas tonight for him, and we'll see whether or not that works out for him again. But Luke Glendenning has had, I think, one of the better seasons he's had in recent history. I think his recent career, I think you can look at this year and say, you know what, it's been a pretty good year for him. Buffalo, I went with a player who's been all over the place. So here's the oddity of Casey Middlestad's career on this channel. So he gets drafted. I like Middlestead. He comes in and he's playing. I like him. Early last season, so 2019-2020, I was like, Middlestead, he seems to have finally found his game. Within, a month? He's in the AHL. Everything's falling apart. And by the time the offseason rolls around, we're kind of looking at Buffalo and saying, well, so Middlestead's probably not going to make it. And in order for him to take that next step, he's probably going to have to be traded. Think along the same lines as like Sam Bennett going to Florida and then, oh, hey, I know how to score now. Casey Middlestead, it looked like it was going to be a similar story. Over the last month, he's become quite the turnaround story for the Buffalo Sabres. And right now, he looks like he is probably going to be an anchor for them on their top six next season. So kudos to Middlestead for turning things around. Nashville. I'm going to go with a guy for Nashville that's kind of the same story. So in the offseason, David Poyle said he saw Ellie Tolvinen as part of their top six, right? Early in the season, it didn't work out. And he kind of looked lost out there too. Like there didn't seem to be that whatever they were looking for wasn't there. As the season's gone along, not Tolviner. As the season's gone along, Ellie Tolvinen, not Tolviner, Ellie Tolvinen has become a really good story for the Nashville Predators, and he is providing that scoring now they've been looking for. He drives their power play as well when it's going well. And when he was out, you could tell on the power play that he was out. It made a huge difference. Tolvinen has finally become that player that he was expected to be. It took him a little bit longer, and this is why I don't like to talk about busts and everything, because it's still early. Until a player's about 23 or 24, I think calling a guy, he's a bust, he's done, get rid of him. Yeah, there's some danger in that. A little bit of danger. Just a tad. So yeah, Tolvinen's been a good story. Philadelphia, I went with a very streaky scorer for them. Joel Farabee. Farabee started off fantastic. Cooled off. Had another really good run. He's cooled off again. A lot of the Flyers have, though. They're having a hard time getting to 3 goals or more right now. But Farabee, to his credit, he's taking those steps, and I think next season, yeah, his production should go up a little bit more. It feels like he's taken that next step this year, and it's been nice to see. And so all you're looking for if you're Philly is a little more consistency in there, and then you've probably got yourself a 30-goal scorer. Maybe 40. As an outlier, I should say maybe 40. Maybe. Still waiting on DeBrincat to hit 50. It's going to happen. I swear it is. Columbus. Columbus was difficult. I am not going to lie. I am not going to stand here and pretend that it was easy for me to pick a player on Columbus who has been a pleasant surprise this year, but I go with Michael Delzado. Now, he had a great start to the season. Some tough spots since then, and he's been a healthy scratch at times. Over the last week, his game has picked up again, I feel, anyways. Columbus, not a team full of guys who've picked up their game. Not a team full of players that have been positive surprises. So I'm going with Michael Delzado as the guy. But if the who was it I had for their feel-good story? Feel-good story, I think, was Roslovic. And if your pleasant surprise is Delzado, you might be out of the playoffs. Just saying, that might be a sign that Columbus probably not contending for the Stanley Cup this year. Not to take anything away from Delzado. Again, really good start. I think he's been better lately. He had some rough times in between. Again, he was a healthy scratch at points too. Minnesota. The easy answer for Minnesota would have been Kaprizov. The problem is there was all kinds of hype about Kaprizov. So I'm going with a player who's managed to, when he's in the lineup, it's worked so well. So last year, Matt Zuccarello, you could debate whether or not it had worked really well, whether or not that had been a really good signing, right, for Minnesota. And honestly, yeah, it has. It's been a really, really good signing for the Minnesota Wild. I've been quite impressed with what they've been able to do. So here's to hoping that Zuccarello can stay healthy and continue to produce for Minnesota like we know he can. We know he can do it. And I'm glad. I remember wishing Dallas had held on to him. I know they would have had to give up an extra draft, or like not an extra draft pick, but a first rounder if they'd held on to him. But man, he worked out so well in Dallas when he was healthy. It would have been nice to see them hold on to him. Boston. Boston was kind of tough because most of them have kind of performed where we would have expected them to. And in this guy's case, it's been an up and down year. As long as you don't over rely on Jacob Zboril, he's been good. But the interesting thing with Jakob is, coming into this year, I looked at Boston's defense and I said, that's not good enough. They didn't really replace the guys that left, Krug and Chara. How is this going to work? It's worked out okay. They don't necessarily get enough points from their blue line, and Zboril definitely doesn't provide the points, but he's been a good, solid defensive defenseman, and I think he's achieved more this year than I expected. I didn't expect him to necessarily be a regular. I thought probably at best he'd probably be the number 7, might get into a number 6 role, but he's played more than I'd expected, and I think he's done a decent job. And Boston, definitely a team that's been ravaged with injuries on their blue line through large portions of this year. And I think Sporeal has done as well as can be expected, and I'm kind of interested to see what happens with him next year. If there is that next level for him, if maybe there's a little more offense too, or whether or not this is just what you see is what you get right now, right? Florida. So with Florida, I made sure this guy wasn't the feel-good story. Make sure I hadn't already covered it, and it wasn't. And I just want to say, I know that I smudge it with my finger. I have erasers everywhere. It's just that's the way I do it. I do it during games that way too. Mackenzie Wieger. And with Mackenzie Wieger, we have discussed for years how good he is defensively, really, really solid defensively. The offense that's come out of him this year has been fantastic. And I don't know that in the wildest dreams of the Florida Panthers organization, they would have dreamt that he could score the way he has this year. It's been great. And it's helped because they've been without Aaron Ekblad for a short while here. And they're still doing pretty well. And they're still getting offense from the blue line. And Mackenzie Wieger is a large part of that. So, kudos to him, and pretty good show overall from him. Chicago. So for Chicago, I kind of had to go with a goaltender. Before the season started, we discussed the starter and backup in each organization, right? So the goaltending tandems. And I had Chicago at 31st. And I'm pretty sure I had Delia and Subban as the tandem. And it looked like Lankinen was probably number 3. And to start the season, that's how it worked. Delia, Subban, both of them didn't play well out of the gate. So Lankinen's given the job. He's been pretty good. And I've been a vocal supporter of Lankinen since he was at the World Championships a couple years ago. Did really well. And here he is now in the NHL, and he's playing pretty well. And again, he may have his off nights here and there, but he looks like an NHL goaltender going forward, and it solves the biggest question mark Chicago had going into this season. It's a young goaltender, too, and suddenly letting go of Corey Crawford, while it may be painful because of the 3 Stanley Cup rings during that era, and you don't like to see players leave who played during that era, it works out pretty well. And Crawford will end up back. I know he's retired, but he'll just end up back in everybody ends up back in the Chicago organization. Everybody. You can't leave Chicago. You can't. You can leave. You come back. Either they trade for you or you end up in their organization or something along those lines. New Jersey. Miles Wood. I can't say enough good things about Miles Wood. It's not possible. The other one that I thought about putting up here, and I'm going to give an honorable mention here too. I don't think I had. No, I didn't have him as the feel-good story. Is Sharon Govich. So for me, it's Miles Wood and it's Sharon Govich. And I always say when I talk about Sharon Govich in previews or reviews, it's not about the points, it's not about the goals, it's the work ethic, it's the two-way game that's so impressive with Sharon Govich. With Wood, there's no off nights for him. There's no night where you say, well, I wish Miles Wood had been a lot better than what he was. And he's got goals as well. I think he's up to 15 now. But he's such a presence on the ice. And at a time where New Jersey's going through this rebuild, it's a full-on rebuild. You don't trade Zajac and Palmieri because, you think you're going to be a contender next year. And yet there's enough young players here and there's other guys coming in that New Jersey should get better next year. But Wood, it feels like can be one of those veteran guys that they really count on and can be really one of the vocal leaders in the room. So, Wood's been very impressive for me this year. Dallas. I went back and forth on a couple for Dallas. But for Dallas, I'll say this. Jason Robertson, I had expected, he'd play this year. I'd expected, maybe he'll get 20 points, maybe 15. Dallas has its issues with goal scoring, so Robertson, they'll probably ease him into the lineup and probably get 15, 20 points over 56 games, maybe 25. No. Robertson's been fantastic. And the interesting thing, too, is that I talk a lot about Kaprizov in Minnesota and how he's kind of rejuvenated Rask. And I think with Robertson, I think he rejuvenates the careers of players he's on lines with as well. I think his energy, I think his effort, I think all of it is appreciated by the Dallas Stars. And so Dallas has a pretty bright future right now. At a time where you've got Ben on a contract that looks expensive, Sagan on an expensive contract that's, it's going to be around for a while, and he's been injured all year. But with young guys like Robertson, with Hintz, there's a pretty good future there for Dallas. And I don't really care who wins the Rookie of the Year award. I really don't. If Robertson doesn't get it, I don't care. All I care about is he's a really good top six forward. He's scoring more than I'd expected. And the kid looks like a star. So I do not care about hardware. LA. LA may have been difficult to come up with somebody as well. But based on play over the last month, I'm going with Trevor Moore. Trevor Moore has been kind of sort of fantastic over the last few weeks. And he's an underrated player. And the goal scoring, I think, can be there as well. I wouldn't be all that surprised if he comes in next year for LA, and depending what line you throw him on and what kind of opportunity he gets, I wouldn't be surprised if he puts up 15 or 20 goals over an 82-game schedule. So, Moore for me has been really good, and I like the progression he's shown. San Jose, which should be on the other page back here. I'm going to give credit where it's due again. This is kind of the same as the Tyler Myers thing over here. For San Jose, I'm going with Martin Jones. Martin Jones, the numbers are not great, but Martin Jones has had a much better season this year than he did the last two regular seasons. There were so many games, it felt like there were so many games over the previous two regular seasons where Jones was putting them behind the eight ball right out of the gate. And so it kind of felt like San Jose was fighting against allowing any shots early, and that Jones, it just wasn't there, and his numbers were awful. The numbers, while they're not where you'd like them to be right now, I can tell you he's playing a lot better. It's for me, I think it's been the defense in front of him. Now it's as much the defense in front of him as anything else. And I think that if you're San Jose, you have to feel pretty good about Jones going forward. It will be interesting, though, to see what they do in expansion, because Kozanosh, who's currently the backup, he is listed, according to Cap Friendly, as being eligible for the expansion draft. So would they protect him? Do they take the chance then that Seattle takes Jones's contract, which would free them up under the salary cap to maybe make a different move in goal? Maybe looking at what Minnesota did, picking up Cam Talbot. It'll be interesting to see. But Martin Jones, it's been an impressive turnaround for him this year. St. Louis, again on this page here. St. Louis, I'm going with, and this is the thing, I've been more impressed this year with Ryan O'Reilly than I ever have been. I have never been as impressed with Ryan O'Reilly as I am this year, because he's got an edge now. There's an edge this season that I haven't seen with him. So today, I already had this list made up during that game, and I wasn't even concerned with what happened in that game. That's not why O'Reilly's there. The intensity to his game seems to be ratcheted up to a playoff level in the regular season. And while the team itself has been a disappointment at times, I wouldn't put any of that on O'Reilly at all. I think O'Reilly has been fantastic. And again, the penalty minutes, I think, are part and parcel of him playing a more physical, a little more of an edge in his game. And I've been really impressed. So the points and the goals are great and everything. I just think his all-around game has been over the top. And I think he brings that playoff intensity every night now. So, not too shabby. Vegas. When the Vegas Golden Knights picked up Alec Martinez from LA, I don't think any of us were looking and going, well, he'll probably, over a full season, he'd probably get about 50 points in Vegas. No. I hadn't expected the kind of point production we've seen from Martinez. And not only that, but he fits in really, really well. That learning curve that you see some players struggle with new teams. Oddly enough, from Vegas, Nate Schmidt's had that problem in Vancouver. I would expect Nate Schmidt to have a much better season next year than he's had this year in Vancouver. Martinez, it just worked right out of the gate, right away. And this year, it just feels like he's kind of sort of fantastic for Vegas. So I know that may be a term I'm using a lot in this video, because again, these are guys who've impressed me. It's not like it's, okay, so 15 of these guys have impressed me and the other 16 have ticked me off. So Martinez, really, really good player. And the offense from that blue line in Vegas, That's one of the under-the-radar things about Vegas, is just how mobile that defense is and how good they are at generating points. Anaheim. Anaheim was not easy. Was not easy. I thought about putting up Comtois, and I thought, nah. I know Anthony Stolarz hasn't played that many games. I know Anthony Stolarz is an odd choice, but I'm okay with that. Stolarz in the games he's played for Anaheim, he's played a number of places, so it makes sense that I'd maybe mess that up. But yeah, Stolarz in Anaheim, I think he's shown just in the limited games he's played. Yep, Ryan Miller moves on after this year, and it should be Gibson and Stolarz next year. The other interesting thing is that with Anaheim, the questions have started being asked now about, so how long do they keep Gibson? How bad does this get? Do you keep Gibson all the way through? And if they decide to make a move, Stolarz could become a permanent backup for Anaheim. I'm not pretending he's going to be the starter. Not crazy. But I think he's earned the right now to maybe get himself a backup job. I think he's done that. And I think that's been impressive because he's playing behind a team that's not been impressive this year, and his numbers have been decent. So kudos to Stolarz for that. I always have great respect for players that stick around and try to make it and go to various organizations. Then when they break through, it feels kind of nice. Washington. So when Zdeno Chara was let go by Boston, I kind of said, well, that sucks. But I didn't freak out. I know there were some Bruins fans that did. I didn't freak out. I didn't get really upset about it because I understood. I thought, no, Zdeno Chara, his prime days are done. His days as a top four defenseman are pretty much done. He's playing over 18 minutes a game in Washington. He is playing for a team that's fighting for first spot in the East. It's not like Zdeno Chara went and played on a bottom feeder and got a top four role. So he's played well in Washington, and it's worked better than I thought it would when they signed him, and I thought it was a pretty smart signing when they did. And I think he's earned the right to come back next year. I would be really surprised if Washington doesn't sit down with him and say, look, we'd like to bring you back again next year. How do you feel about that? It may wait until after the expansion draft and just don't sign him before the expansion draft, talk to him after. Not that Seattle is going to take him anyways if you sign him, but it may wait until after that anyways. But I would not be surprised if Chara comes back again next year. And I think he's had an impressive season. I would argue he's been better this year in Washington than he was last year in Boston. Maybe he tried to do too much in Boston. Maybe being the captain in Boston, all those years in Boston as a prime guy, he was still trying to do too much. But it's worked out really well in Washington. So there you go. Let me know your picks for any of these teams in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.